Aaron Maté is here. He's the New York-based journalist who hosts the news show Pushback for the Gray Zone, and he has his own Substack at mate.substack.com, right? Is that it? I got it right?
Correct, yeah.
And he's an award-winning journalist. He got the Izzy Award for his meticulous debunking of Russiagate, and that's what he's here to talk about today, because the report on matters related to intelligence activities and investigations arising out of the 2016 presidential campaigns, better known as the Durham report, was filed. And this is what it says. Now, it was an investigation into Russiagate, and so what Durham was doing, who, by the way, is very respected and considered non-political in a lot of circles, he was going to see if there was any malfeasance inside the investigation into Trump, and if the FBI was out to get him. And it turns out all that stuff was true, and that Trump actually was right when he said that they were tapping his phone and they were spying on him and all that stuff. And even Jake Tapper had to say this.
Regardless, the report is now here. It has dropped. And it might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hoped for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI, and to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump.
So it exonerates Donald Trump and it indicts the FBI, and it was devastating to the FBI to the degree that it actually does exonerate Trump. But he says it's not everything that GOP was hoping for. What else could they be hoping for? That the report was going to help them grow their penises bigger? Are you kidding? It did okay. So here's the USA Today's coverage. Trump is vindicated on Russian collusion. FBI deserves its shame. That's from USA Today. Here's another headline from USA Today. Trump was right. Russian collusion was a hoax. Good luck regaining public trust. You know, when the USA Today says it, you know it's over. Okay? That's the official newspaper of free continental breakfast at mid-price hotels. And if they're saying it, you know it's true. Here's but here's how the New York Times reports it. John Durham's report on the FBI's investigation into the Trump campaign's work with Russia, which produced no startling revelations, that's just how the New York Times says it, is being viewed by some conservatives as lending credence to their conspiracy theories about, Jake Tapper, the host on CNN of The Lead? Some conservatives, like Jake Tapper. So he's considered now conservative. That's good to know. Also, and by the way, look, New York Times has a gold check mark. Isn't that nice? It produced no startling revelations to the New York Times because they knew that Russiagate was bullshit all along and that the FBI was lying. That's why it's not a startling revelation to them. But personally, I am startled at the revelation of how far the New York Times will go to protect a debunked conspiracy theory, even after the rest of the corporate news has given up.
It's a collusion theory, Jimmy.
Yeah. And here's what Aaron Maté says. He says the Durham report newly debunks the conspiracy theory that the New York Times and other blue and on outlets promoted, that Trump and his campaign conspired with Russia. It also shows that the top U.S. officials ignored credible intelligence that this conspiracy theory was a Clinton campaign plot. Let's remember, they won the Pulitzer Prize for lying about this. They won a Pulitzer Prize for repeating an easily debunked conspiracy theory. It's so easily debunked that I did it. I did it. Immediately, I did it. So that I knew, and Aaron Maté won an award doing it. So here they are. They're bragging about their Pulitzer Prize for pushing a conspiracy theory cooked up by the Clinton campaign and the FBI. They're supposed to be debunking that stuff, and they're the ones actually push. So again, the biggest sources of misinformation and lies is the government. The next is the corporate media. After that, it's politicians, and then after that, it's then you get to your randos on YouTube. Let me bring in Aaron Maté. Aaron, I want to. So let me just show you what Durham said about this, okay? So Durham said the FBI should have never launched an investigation into alleged Russian collusion with Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, given the slim evidence. Indeed, based on the evidence gathered in multiple exhaustive and costly federal investigations of these matters, including the instant investigation, neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. So what that means is they had zero evidence that Trump and Russia were conspiring together. They had zero evidence when they started Crossfire Hurricane, which was the Russiagate investigation. And of course, we should have never, when he says we should have never launched this investigation. Hey, look, this is America. We should have never launched an invasion into Iraq or tortured some folks or done a lot of things. This is just what we do. Let's move on. Okay. So he says the speed and manner, and by the way, you don't need evidence when you have strong institutional biases, right? Do you? No. So the speed and manner in which the FBI opened the investigated Crossfire Hurricane during the presidential election season based on raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence also reflected a noticeable departure from how it approached prior matters involving possible attempted foreign. So the FBI totally turned their playbook on their head to do what they did to Trump.
This is like Whitey Bulger again.
Yes.
The agent.
Yes.
He's doing it good, getting rid of the Italian mafia, and he's the biggest killer who's being protected by the FBI.
So not only did they have no evidence and they turned their own practices on their head, but not only that, but based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activity, we conclude that the Department that's the Department of Justice and the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law. So another way to say that is they broke the law. So say that's a really long way of saying, that's a real extremely soft way of saying they broke the law. He says they failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. So he's saying that actually the criminals in this Russiagate wasn't Trump, wasn't Russia. It was the FBI and the Department of Justice, which were breaking laws, spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, lies, in order to swing an election. Aaron, let me bring you in. What would you take it wherever you'd like?
So, look, this is all stuff that we've been saying from the start, Jimmy, that this investigation was baseless. There was no evidence for any collusion, and that it was a scam. It was a Clinton campaign scam from the start. And we didn't need John Durham to confirm that, because we've been saying this for years. And it's great that Jake Tapper can acknowledge this, 6 years too late, but
yes,
we were doing this from the start. But let me start with what I think is positive about this report is that it does provide more evidence that U.S. officials going right up to President Obama knew from the start of this investigation. In fact, even days before this investigation formally began in July 2016, that the Clinton campaign was concocting a plot to falsely tie Trump to Russia. The CIA got intelligence that Russia had actually picked up word of a Clinton campaign plot to smear Trump with Russia ties. And John Brennan, who was then the head of the CIA, thought that this was so important that he briefed Obama about this. And he also soon submitted an investigative referral to the FBI about this intelligence, that the Clinton campaign was basically concocting a scam to falsely link Trump to Russia. What did the FBI do? They pretty much ignored that. They didn't investigate Clinton for that. Instead, they used Clinton-funded material like the Steele dossier to investigate Trump. And they opened up an investigation of Trump and his campaign based on some hearsay about what a low-level campaign aide, George Papadopoulos, said about possible Russian help to his campaign. But even that tip right there was totally embellished. And John Durham confirms that that tip was not sufficient grounds to open up an investigation. He also confirms that meanwhile, the FBI, with the full knowledge of Obama and everybody else at the top of his administration, ignored the fact that the Clinton campaign was coming up with this scam. And that's why the Clinton campaign funded the Steele dossier. That's why they came up with that Alpha Bank scam. If you remember that, that was
Yes.
this conspiracy theory that Trump and Russia were secretly in cahoots and communicating via a bank server. And so that's what the Durham report newly underscores. Now, the problem is Durham says there's more evidence of this, but he doesn't reveal it publicly. He says that's in a classified appendix, more evidence of that Clinton campaign plot. And I think the public should get that because this was a monumental scam. This was a hugely damaging scam. It undermined a presidency. However you feel about Trump, he was elected by in a fair election, and this was used to undermine him. This was used to smear any dissent as being backed by Russia. This worsened relations with Russia because it made diplomacy with Russia impossible. This had all kinds of horrible consequences. It dominated the news media for more than 2 years. And so we should learn how it came about and how specifically the Clinton campaign was involved in perpetuating in causing this scam.
Well, here,
now,
can I
yeah.
let me just show you. This is right from the Durham report. He said the office also considered as part of its investigation the government's handling of certain intelligence that it received during the summer of 2016. This is what you were just talking about. The intelligence concerned the purported approval by Hillary Clinton on July 26, 2016, of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian security services. Now, so they knew that Hillary Clinton was doing this, that she was going to concoct. That's what stirring up a scandal means. They're going to make up a scandal saying that Donald Trump is working with the Russian security services. And then in the intelligence community, the FBI, they referred to the intelligence hereafter as the Clinton Plan intelligence. That's what Durham refers to it as. The Clinton Plan. The Clinton Plan. DNI John Radcliffe declassified the following information about the Clinton Plan intelligence in September 2020 and conveyed it to the Senate Judiciary Committee. What was that? That in late 2016, U.S. intelligence agencies obtained insight into Russian intelligence analysts alleging that the U.S. had approved a campaign plan to stir up a scandal against Donald Trump, the U.S. presidential candidate, Donald Trump, by tying him to Putin and the Russians, hacking of the Democratic National Committee. So they knew this. So they knew this was all a story made up by Hillary Clinton. They, meaning the FBI. The intelligence community does not know the accuracy of this, so that's blah, blah. According to his handwritten notes, CIA Director Brennan subsequently briefed President Obama and other senior national security officials on the intelligence, including the alleged approval by Hillary Clinton of the proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by Russian security service. So even Obama knew this was garbage.
Yeah, they all knew it.
Okay, so go ahead. Let me bring in Aaron. So that's what you were just talking about, that they knew that Hillary Clinton concocted this story, this conspiracy theory to damage her political opponent. And instead of, so what the FBI did was then go along with that lie. Go ahead.
Yeah. What they should have done is investigated Clinton for this, because
that's right.
You shouldn't be coming up with scams to smear your political opponent. That's worthy of investigation. Instead, they used the scam material that the Clinton campaign funded, like the Steele dossier, and they relied on that for surveillance applications on people like Carter Page, who was a volunteer for the Trump campaign. So Durham newly confirms that, and there's more information on that that's currently classified in a classified appendix, and I hope that gets released because the public should know about that. There needs to be accountability for this scam. Now, John Durham does not deliver accountability at all.
No.
He delivers some facts, but most of them we already knew. And meanwhile, there's a whole list of people.
He wasn't even allowed to interview, right?
Well, he tried to interview. He tried to interview Peter Strzok. He tried to interview Peter Strzok is the FBI agent who opened up the Trump-Russia probe and was caught sending text messages mocking Trump and his supporters, and Bernie Sanders too. They tried to interview Bill Priestap, who was a senior FBI official, approved the opening of the Russia investigation. James Comey, director of the FBI. Andrew McCabe, deputy director of the FBI. Rodney Jaffe, who was the tech executive enlisted by the Clinton campaign to come up with that Alpha Bank scam. Mark Elias, who was an attorney for Clinton at Fusion GPS. They hired they hired Christopher Steele to do the Steele dossier. They also hired Crowdstrike to investigate the alleged hack of the DNC server and blame Russia, and Glenn Simpson, who was the partner in Fusion GPS. So Durham tried to interview all these people. They all said no, and Durham just took it. He didn't subpoena them. He had the power of subpoena, but he let all these key figures involved in this scam not talk to him. And I don't understand how possibly he could have let that happen unless he was intimidated. And hopefully,
of course
when he testifies, he'll be questioned about it. But meanwhile, compare that to Mueller and the Mueller team, because Mueller actually was just a nominal figurehead, as we saw from his testimony in the end. He didn't really know what his investigation was about. But Mueller's team used every authority they could to bully people and indicting people for offenses that had nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion, like tax fraud or lobbying issues, like with the case of Paul Manafort, and did everything they could to make this investigation look credible and subpoenaed everyone they possibly could. So the comparison between Durham, who is investigating a scam, and how just lenient he was and how powerless he was and using his own authority, compared to Mueller, who's using their authority to perpetuate the scam, is pretty striking. And I don't understand why Durham was so soft. And on that note,
he's going against the entire United States empire. That's why.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you don't think he was intimidated? Of course he was intimidated.
Yes, of course. I think you're exactly. I think he was intimidated. I do. If I'm unless he has some other crazy reason I'm not getting, I do think he was intimidated, because you're right. He is going up against the national security state and a vital scam that they played on the world. Now, on that note, speaking of not, getting to the truth, he tells us nothing, zilch, about the thing that started this whole Russiagate affair, which is a Clinton campaign contractor, Crowdstrike, saying that Russia did it, only to later admit under oath that they had no evidence that Russia hacked the DNC. So Durham tells us nothing about that. He's completely silent on it, even though he acknowledges how improper it was for the FBI to rely on all of this information that was generated by Clinton campaign contractors. So, for example, he points out how ridiculous it was that the FBI was relying on material that was generated by people working for Clinton, like Fusion GPS and the Steele dossier, and also the Alpha Bank scam. For some reason, he doesn't apply that same observation to Crowdstrike, whose allegation of Russian hacking of the DNC kicked off the entire thing. That's where all this began. And he tells us nothing about that. And that to me is also inexplicable, because now we know from testimony, we've covered this a lot, that Crowdstrike under oath privately told Congress that, oh yeah, when we said that Russia hacked the DNC, actually, we had no evidence of that.
So the whole thing that the Russia hacked the DNC server, and they got these emails and they gave it to WikiLeaks, and they were all working together and they released them, and that through the election, that was always a lie. And I was able to debunk that at this show with Bill Binney here. I'm going to guess in 2016, maybe I did it. I don't know. But it was always a lie. It was easily debunkable. And that's what this was all based on. And the FBI never even looked at the server. The FBI never looked at the server. But they did conclude Russia hacked it based on a private company called Crowdstrike that the Clinton campaign hired, or the DNC hired, to look at the server. And the FBI never did their own investigation of it. That's not how you don't do investigations like that. You don't go, oh, there's a murder scene here. Don't worry, I'll do the investigation and I'll hand it over to the FBI. And then that's not how things work, right? So that's how you knew it was garbage to begin with. But on top of it, what you just said, that in 2017, the head of the Crowdstrike admitted in testimony to Congress, in I think closed testimony, secret testimony, that they had zero evidence that Russia did this. They had no evidence. So meaning another way of saying that, we made it up out of thin air. We made it up. And so that's what this is all revealing. But again, this is not going to be reported like this. Jake Tapper kind of admitted it there. That was wild. I want to read you 3 more paragraphs from the Durham report. The matter was open, meaning the investigation into Trump, Russia, was open as a full investigation without ever having spoken to the person who provided the information. Further, the FBI did so without any intelligent, significant review of its own intelligence database to collection and examination of any relevant intelligence from other U.S. intelligence. And number 3, it's interviews of witnesses. None. Essential to understand the raw information that had received or for using any of the standard analytical tools typically employed by the FBI in evaluating raw intelligence. Had it done anything it normally does, the FBI would have learned that their own experience to Russia analysts had no information about the Trump being involved with Russian leadership officials, nor were others. So they would have known that because their own experts in their intelligence community, the United States, had no knowledge of Trump and Russia collusion. That's what Durham is saying. And they didn't do the basic investigative steps that the FBI normally does. So what this tells you is that this was made up by the Democratic National Committee, the Clinton campaign, and the FBI, just made up and then repeated uncritically by corporate news media and YouTubers, like all of them except for this show and Gray Zone and Aaron Maté. All of them, all the rest of them repeated it uncritically. You want to say something?
Yeah, can I quote the great Bill Maher back when there was evidence?
Yes.
I don't need evidence to know Trump is a traitor. And we got a big cheer. He was because Trump said, "Hey, Russia, if you're listening, please hack her." What did he say? Please hack her on TV.
Yes,
and it's based on that alone.
Durham called everybody.
Go ahead,
Jimmy. Everybody who either bought into this, which was so many people, including on the left, or who stayed silent. They abetted, a really, really dangerous scam that's made the world a lot more dangerous and the country a lot more dangerous. Well, it was a scam that criminalized diplomacy with Russia. It was a scam that helped preserve the power of the neoliberal wing of the party that lost to Trump in 2016, who should have been completely discredited and humiliated for good. And the Bernie Sanders wing of the party should have taken over. Instead, the Clinton wing used this to basically deflect blame for losing. And people like Bernie Sanders went along with it. And their media followers took the cue as well. It wouldn't stand up to this. And now we see how baseless it was. And they should do some self-reflection on what they enabled, because staying silent on something like this has been very, very consequential and bad for everybody. And I don't think we'd be in a proxy war right now at this level with Russia, if not for Russiagate, because Russiagate, of course, made diplomacy with Russia impossible.
The only reason people are okay with going to war with Russia over Ukraine is because they've been led to believe that all our problems have been caused by Vladimir Putin and Russia. Yeah. And that we got to go get him. He's a bad guy that's been hurting us. And so that's that's how you manufacture consent for war. And they did it, and they've been doing it for the last 7 years. Go ahead, Kurt.
Remember how Obama wasn't born here and he's a Muslim? It was probably a pretty good motivation to take a hard stand on your drone warfare. Like, people think I'm a Muslim, I got to go bomb. And there's always a motivator of like, you're maybe with this enemy, and they're, no, I'm not, and they got to go do
So he had
extra.
to overreact.
It's part of it.
Yeah. So he says this. Well, of course, he calls the dossier unvetted and unverified. But he also said, in particular, he singled out a provision that described a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation that Durham said became the basis for 4 surveillance applications targeting Carter Page. So there's a conspiracy of cooperation between the FBI, the FISA court, the Clinton campaign. That's what he's talking about.
Sounds like a collusion theory.
And then Durham said the FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane based on unevaluated evidence at the direction of former director Andrew McCabe, who was fired by the FBI for lying to the FBI not once, not twice, but 3 times. And former Deputy Assistant Director of Counterintelligence Peter Strzok, who his emails and texts have revealed had vowed to stop Trump from becoming president.
He talked about it the way Biden talked about the key that pipeline, the Nord Stream.
The Nord Stream. We'll stop it. He did.
He said
he did talk about it just like the way Biden talked about. We're going to stop Nord Stream 2. That's how this guy talked about.
We're going to stop him.
Stopping president.
We'll do it.
That's right. So anyway, so they knew that the Hillary Clinton campaign, Barack Obama knew, the head of the FBI knew, everybody knew that Hillary Clinton had ginned up this story to smear Donald Trump by tying him with Russia. And they just went along with it because, as I've heard Glenn Greenwald talk about, and it is true, that the liberal class, the Democrats in this country, just like Sam Harris revealed, that they think it's okay to drop all of your values and to get rid of Donald Trump because he is some kind of existential threat. He isn't an existential threat. He's a con man, a game show host who never wanted to be president in the first place. But Hillary Clinton is so repulsive and the Democrats are so corrupt and the Republicans are so corrupt that people were willing to take a chance on him. And let's remember, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Aaron, but this is 100% fact, that if Donald Trump didn't win and Bernie Sanders did, they would be doing the exact same thing to Bernie Sanders. Everything that they've done to Trump, they would be doing to Bernie Sanders. In fact, they already started doing it to him, and Bernie went along with it. They already started saying he was working with the Russians, that his followers were violent and misogynistic and racist. Yeah. They already did all that stuff to Bernie Sanders and his followers, and Bernie went along with it because he is a servant to power.
Yeah, they were able to do that to Bernie because Bernie propped up Russiagate. Instead of saying this is a scam that my opponent is using to deflect blame for being such a horrible candidate, he went along with it. He got up on the Senate floor and introduced a measure to stop Russian interference.
That's right.
He enabled he's a complete chump on this, and so are his supporters who went along with it, or who didn't have the courage to speak out against it.
And then he votes for the war.
A lot of people.
And then he votes for the war that this that this made possible. So we've talked about how Russiagate was manufacturing consent for a war with Russia. They had been planning this war with Russia since at least 2014. And so that's what Russiagate, and I warned when I was at the Young Turks, I couldn't stop warning them, this is going to lead to a war with Russia, a nuclear war in World War III, and this is bad. And they don't care. Of course they don't care. And, they all Russiagated. When I say YouTube, I mean, all the people, Crystal Ball Russiagated. They all did it.
You got to pick your spot to tell the truth, and you're not going to waste your capital telling the truth about Trump, that piece of shit.
That's right. That's right.
That's the hill you want to die on, the truth about Trump.
So it is true that the people who watch The View or Bill Maher or Rachel Maddow or CNN think it's okay to lie and use the FBI, the intelligence community, the media to distort, manipulate, lie, so we can stop this existential
threat. I think it's obligatory.
Yes, it is. So you have a moral, and if you have a truth that goes against their narrative, they say you're helping Trump. So you can't tell the truth. So journalists have not told the truth since Trump got elected, and before that, they haven't told the truth at all. Except for Aaron Maté, who won an award for it. But again, the Pulitzer Prize goes to the guys lying about it.
And again, look, and Jimmy, and just from like a partisan point of view, they were helping Trump because,
of course,
when Trump was doing things like the tax heist, cutting taxes for the wealthy, liberals were not focused on that because they were obsessed with Robert Mueller and having like Robert Mueller dolls and T-shirts and doing odes to him on Saturday Night Live. All they cared about was the Mueller probe. And, I've said this a lot. There were bigger protests to save Robert Mueller's job from liberals than there were to oppose Trump's tax heist favoring the wealthy or his cuts to Obamacare or anything else he did that was actually bad. This completely sidelined any effective opposition to Trump. So I think it was ultimately a big gift to him and his party, at least to their agenda.
100%.
And this wasn't just about Trump too, because again, this also was about criminalizing what Trump was saying back in 2016, which appealed to a lot of voters. And I don't think Trump was very sincere, but what he was saying appealed to people. And that was, he was critical of foreign wars. And he talked about getting along with Russia. And people inside the national security state, they lost their minds at that. They couldn't handle that. And that helped motivate them to undermine his presidency. And they were successful at that. He came in talking about getting along with Russia, and they boxed him in. And by accusing him of being a traitor constantly, made it impossible for anything constructive to get done. And that's why when his administration, people like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo carried out policies that increased confrontations with Russia, the whole media looked away because they didn't fit with their dumb conspiracy theory that Trump is really a Russian asset. So this was a disaster for so many reasons. And, except for Jake Tapper's like 13 seconds there of, yeah, this does exonerate Trump. We're not going to see any accountability whatsoever.
Check out my new stand-up special, COVID Lies Are Funny, at jimmydore.com. Only $10. Become a premium member. We're going to be on tour in Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Los Angeles, Bakersfield, California, Baltimore, Maryland, and San Francisco, California. Plus, did we say Chicago? There's lots of stuff. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. See you there.